Welcome, everybody. We are in our series on seeking wholeness. We are on our second lesson on resolving conflict, learning the biblical ways to resolve conflict. I'll start off by reading Matthew 18:15. It says, "Now if your brother sins, go and show him his fault in private. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother." All right, so Matthew 18:15. Seeking wholeness, resolving conflict. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. In the United States, we spent $24 billion every year on work and family conflict, resolving conflict. So it's important, it's expensive, it's something that we all have to deal with every day, no matter if it's with family, with coworkers, with friends, in the romantic relationships. We have conflict, and that's a way of life. Different cultures have different views on conflict. There's some cultures that they try to avoid conflict. They avoid conflicts. Other cultures embrace it. There's some cultures where it's rude to say no. You're never supposed to say no to someone. They have creative ways of saying no, but they're never supposed to say no to anyone. So we're going to look at how the Bible approaches conflict. And as an outline, that was the introduction. Then we're going to look at our traits of wholeness. We're going to look at a review of the first part, resolving conflict. This is lesson 2, the second part. So you can check out the first part online if you missed it. And then we're going to look at why we have conflict, God's model for resolving conflict, strategies for addressing conflict, and conclude with the fact that God can use conflict. So now we'll look at traits of wholeness. So we're in our lesson on seeking wholeness. The traits of wholeness, we've defined some qualities that we're striving towards. Seeking wholeness, we're seeking to be spiritually, mentally, and emotionally healthy. God didn't just promise us eternal life. We're promised joy, peace, patience, and self-control. And so we want to not just look at the words, what the Bible instructs us to do. We want to practically look at how we can do it. How can we take every thought captive? How can we submit to the Holy Spirit? So in this series, we're looking at ways to be healed from the experiences we've had from the past and the stresses of everyday life. So the traits of wholeness that we're striving for, we've identified a bunch of traits that we're striving for. Those include authenticity, honesty, kindness, not seeking external approval or validation, living by values and principles, setting boundaries, taking ownership of your responsibilities, living with purpose and passion, optimism, confidence, healthy relationships with others, not losing control of your emotions, being free from addictions, addressing conflicts with truth and love, which we'll look at today. Yeah. Vulnerability, not being critical or judgmental, not being jealous of others so we can genuinely applaud the success of others, forgiving those who've wronged us in the past, knowing that you're worthy of receiving love, not being afraid to fail, being able to manage irrational fear, worry, and anxiety, having selfless encounters with others, not manipulating other people to try to control their actions and their reactions. We care about other people's feelings, so we have empathy. We want to be patient. We want to not give in to peer and social pressure. We want to be able to communicate directly and not passive aggressively. We want to take responsibility we don't want to take responsibility for other people's emotions, but we want to take responsibility for our own emotions. Mm-hmm. We want to be slow to anger. We want to have the ability to maturely express our wants, needs, and desires. We want to be able to be led by the Holy Spirit. So those are the traits that we're striving for in this series. We did a lesson on resolving conflict the last time we met, so I'll go over and summarize that. Prior to that, we had a lesson on reconciliation, and we looked at 11 steps on how to reconcile. The first step was to ask God for wisdom. Welcome, Kikwa. First step, reconciliation. So some of these steps, most of these steps will apply for resolving conflict. But this was specifically reconciliation. You had and it was looking at the example where you did something, you were at fault, but it's in general also you want to you want to restore a relationship that you have with someone. So the first step was to ask God for wisdom. So go to God in prayer, ask him how to approach the situation. The second step was to focus not on winning. So you want to focus on reconciliation. So the goal is to restore the relationship. So reconciliation is restoring the relationship. So you're not focused on winning, you're focused on restoring the relationship. We want to do our part. So we can't have any control over whether that person apologizes, whether that person takes the blame, whether that person owns up, but we can do our part. So we're only responsible for doing our part. And then that person is responsible for their part. So you do your part, and that's all you can do. Leave the rest to God. You want to choose the right time. You want to do it when it's a convenient time for the other person, a convenient time for you, where you're not going to be interrupted, where you're not going to be distracted. You want to begin with what's your fault. So start off by saying, even if they were 95% at fault and you only had a 5% small part of it, start off by admitting your fault part of it, and that will let their guard down, and it'll open the door for reconciliation. Yeah. Number 6, we want to avoid offensive language. Proverbs 15:1 says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. So if you start responding harshly, it's going to impede reconciliation. Number 7, don't respond harshly. Don't respond harshly to the person. Number 8, seek to understand before seeking to be understood. So before you go and try to explain your point and tell them why you're right and tell them your side of the story, listen to their side first. Listen to their side first and seek to understand their point of view. Because a lot of times there's some type of fear, there's some type of hurt that's underneath it. So if you can listen for that, listen to their side of the story. Listen to their heart and their perspective. So try to hear their perspective. Why do they see it that way? They're not a dumb person, so why would they do something like this? Try to hear their perspective on it. You don't necessarily have to agree with it, but at least try to understand it. Don't dismiss their fears. A lot of times it's like, well, my fears are valid, but your fears, that's crazy. Why would you be afraid of something that things I'm afraid of are valid, but things you're afraid of are crazy? An example I used was during COVID. Some people are like, well, I'm afraid of this virus, so I think we should wear a mask. And other people are like, oh, I'm afraid the government is trying to take control of take our rights away, so we shouldn't have to. And it's like, well, no, my fear is valid. Your fear is ridiculous. No, my fear is valid. Your fear. So don't dismiss the other person's fears. Try to hear their fears as well as yours. And don't be self-centered. Don't be self-centered. Look for the other person's benefit as well. So those were the steps for reconciliation. Oh, hey, welcome, Kenneth. Any thoughts on those?
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Okay, so we're reviewing the last lesson. We talked about a peacemaker or a false peacemaker. We want to be peacemakers, but there's also a false peacemaker. Romans 12:18 reads, if possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all people. So we want to be at peace with all people, but we talked about the concept of a false peacemaker. Being a false peacemaker is when you're avoiding conflict out of fear. So you're not doing it just for peace, you're doing it out of fear. So peacemaking isn't avoiding and it's not appeasing. Peacemaking isn't letting the person get their way all the time. We talked about the example when there's war. If another country comes to your border and is going to attack, the way to make peace isn't just to sit back and let them invade the country and take over your capital and invade. The way to make peace is to initiate a dialogue with them. So peacemaking is initiating a dialogue. You initiate a dialogue, talk about the issue, is how you make peace. You become a peacemaker by addressing the issue, proactively addressing the issue. at an attempt to resolve it. So you're not just addressing the issue, stating your point or yelling, getting your piece. You're addressing the issue with an attempt to resolve the situation. So it's not just, hey, let me speak my mind. It's an attempt to resolve the situation, to make peace. Your goal is making peace. That's peacemaking. We talked about the fact that conflict is necessary. Conflict is, if you're in a relationship, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be conflict. Healthy relationships have conflict. So it does. But if you fight all the time, that means you haven't learned how to resolve conflict. So the goal isn't to have conflict all of the time. You want to learn how to resolve conflict. So, but there has to be conflict in order to resolve conflict. So healthy relationships have conflict, because if you never have conflict, then it's likely that you're not being authentic. You're not being authentic with the other person, and then you're not bringing up issues that you have problems with, and you're not giving a chance to reconcile. You only know your side of the story. You're right, the other person is wrong because you didn't bring it up. So in your mind, I'm right, they're wrong. I'm the good person, they're the bad person. But you don't give them a chance to say their side of the story. You don't give them you don't give a chance for reconciliation. So conflict is necessary. Then we talked about the path. Or any thoughts on that? No. Okay. Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah. It's interesting using the word "it's necessary." I'm just kind of thinking about that. Is it how necessary is it?
It's necessary to have a real, authentic relationship. So if you, unless you're, if you have issues, if you ever have any issues with the other person, and you've never had conflict, then you aren't. Then that means you're just I guess it's not necessary. If you're always happy and nothing ever bothers you, and nothing the person ever did ever bothered you, but it also would have to be the same with the other person. Nothing you ever did. So you're also the perfect person, and nothing you ever did ever bothers the other person. Then it wouldn't be necessary. But in order to have an authentic relationship, it's necessary in order to have a authentic, good relationship. Because otherwise you're carrying this resentment. You get layer and layer of resentment. You're just holding it in more. You're holding in more. You're holding it in more, and then you may get to the point when there is a conflict. You're like bringing up stuff that happened 12 years ago that you never brought up. That you've been.
Yeah.
So it's necessary for to have a good relationship.
Yeah. Not being.
It's not a goal.
Not being amiable, but really having an authentic relationship, because you're gonna have some conflict in an authentic relationship, because nobody knows the other person thoroughly.
Right, and nobody is. We're all damaged. We all have issues. So we all have issues, and at some point, you're gonna get on the other person's nerves somehow. We all.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I didn't mean to draw that out, but yeah.
No, that's fine. Yeah. Okay, then we talked to the path to avoiding conflict. So how can you avoid conflict? So there are ways to reduce the amount of conflict, to avoid conflict. The first way is to clarify your assumptions. So we all have assumptions. We're assuming somebody's going to do something. We expect something. We have assumptions that in our relationships, but oftentimes we haven't voiced these assumptions. We assume that the person would do this. We assume that this is normal, and they didn't do it. But we never voiced that was our assumption. So we want to voice our unspoken assumptions. So if they're unspoken, we want to say it. We want to say our assumptions. So some examples are, of course you're going to come to the family event. We're important to you, aren't we? Or some people think, oh, men should do this. A woman should do that. It's like, oh, well, when mom passes away, I'm definitely going to get the house. We have these assumptions and nobody ever mentions it, but we're operating off of these assumptions that, well, if you really cared for me, then you would have called. You would have called. A good friend calls, so we have these assumptions that we're operating under, and we're assuming that everybody else understands these assumptions. We're assuming that everybody else understands these assumptions. And so, we think that, oh, well, they're an adult, they should understand these things, but we need to. People have had different lives. People grew up with different situations. People grew up in different families. People have had different past relationships, and so we have different things that we expect. And so we need to be able to express the things that we're expecting from the other person. So if you have an expectation, it should be conscious, it should be realistic, it should be spoken, and it should be agreed upon. And if not, then you can't really hold the other person to it.
Name those again. It should be what?
It should be conscious, it should be realistic, it should be spoken, and it should be agreed upon. So conscious being, sometimes we have expectations, but we haven't fully verbalized it or conceptualized it. It's just when we don't get the expectation met is when we realize we have the expectation. So it has to be conscious. It has to be realistic. I'm expecting you to text me every 5 minutes. It's not realistic. I'm expecting, it's like what, or what are you expecting from the other person? It should be spoken, and it should be agreed upon.
Oh, agreed upon. And these are the attributes of what again? I'm sorry.
Oh, for an expectation. For your expectation to be valid.
Oh, okay. For your expectation.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see, any thoughts on that?
For one's expectation to be valid, the expectation should be conscious. What do you mean it should be conscious? For one's expectation.
So valid, I don't know if valid is the right word, but I guess so conscious meaning that you're clear that it is an expectation to you. So conscious to you.
Okay.
So sometimes we have needs or expectations that maybe we don't know about them until the expectation isn't met. You didn't realize you needed to be alone sometime until the person moved in with you. You didn't realize it, so there's some expectations that maybe you never really thought about. So it has to be conscious, meaning, okay, now I've thought about it. Now I realize that I'm expecting this from that person. So it has to be conscious. So you can't just, like, as soon as you don't, that expectation doesn't get met, you can't get mad at the other person. You didn't even realize that yourself that you needed it until it was.
Yeah. Got it.
Okay. All right, and next we have to become aware of your triggers. So we all have things that have happened in the past to us, and sometimes people will do something and it will remind us of something that happened in the past, something that's conscious or unconscious. Maybe there's a wound that we haven't healed from. And so something will do something that reminds us of something in the past, and it'll trigger something into us. Maybe somebody will say a certain word, and you're going to get mad at them, but they didn't have you assumed a certain intent from that word, but they didn't have that intent. But you're triggered from when other people said it, they meant this. When other people did this action, their motive was this. And so you're being triggered by something from the past that's not necessarily related to what's going on in the present. So you see that when something small happens and somebody blows up. And that's, I guess Kenneth always gives the example of his wife, always used to tell him, this can't be about, this can't be about that. It's like, okay, you're upset. This can't be about this. What is this really about? What is this really about?
Yeah. You remember.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a lot of good lessons, good relationship lessons. Yeah. And so here's a video of someone speaking about triggers, sort of related, but interesting nonetheless. Jackie Hill Perry is her name.
Say everybody, I got a quick word. Your triggers are not discernment. What's a trigger? A trigger is when something that happens in the present reminds you of a harmful or painful, traumatic event that happened in the past. It's okay to be triggered. That's normal. We've been through a lot. The problem is when you are unaware or ignorant of your triggers, especially on social media, because what happens is somebody makes a post, somebody posts a picture, has a video, and if you are triggered by a thing but don't realize that it's actually a trigger, what starts to happen is you think that you know what they should have did or how they should have said it or what they really meant. You start acting like you know motives and things when really it isn't that you're discerning, it's that you're commenting out of your own unhealed past, your own unhealed issues. And so I think if we could say, oh, I feel a way about her, the way she playing with her dog, because my dog died in 1976, and I just need to deal with the fact that Toto ain't here no more. And maybe when I deal with that, then I'll actually be able to applaud and like a post about somebody playing with their dog, then to get mad at it. I don't know if that made any sense, but I think if we just deal with our stuff, we'll all be happier, honestly. Hey, say everybody, I got a quick word.
So yeah, we all have triggers. So sometimes, so she started off saying trigger isn't discernment. So a lot of times we want to call something discernment. So somebody, maybe you're in a relationship and that person didn't return, their phone was off. Like you're like, oh, the spirit is telling me that this person is cheating. It was like, well, no, that's because the last two people you dealt with, cheated, and they used to have their phone off. That's not discernment. That's a trigger from, unhealed wounds from the past. A lot of times we like to call it discernment. We think, oh, that's the spirit is telling me that this is this. It's like, no, that's not the spirit. That's just you haven't healed from that thing in the past. And this looks like that. So we need to be aware of our triggers. Be aware of our triggers and not think it's discernment necessarily because you feel a certain way. It's not necessarily discernment. It could be discernment, but we have to learn the difference. Learn the difference between our triggers. So that's our trigger. That's our triggers. And we want to, this is a new one I added, become aware of our biases. So in a similar method, there may be something that we're biased about. So we may draw conclusions about something based on a stereotype we have. A certain person uses a certain intonation or a certain accent, or they have a certain behavior pattern. And so we make an opinion about it. We make an opinion about their heart, their motivation, because of a bias we have, a stereotype. So we may have a stereotype. Oh, that pastor's up there in a $4,000 suit. He must be this and this and this. It's like, well, it's a stereotype. We have a stereotype that we're applying it to people. So we have biases. We have biases in situations. When someone's doing something, we have biases. So become aware of our biases. They'll help us avoid conflict. So there are facts, and there are inferences, and then there are value statements. And so first there's a fact. Like we may say, hey, that guy's got on a purple shirt. And then we make inferences. You know, people with purple shirts usually are abused dogs. And then we make value statements. That guy's a really bad person. You know, that guy's a really bad person because, you know, and so we see the facts and then we make an inference based on our past, based on our experiences, and then we make a value judgment on the situation or the person based on that. So we want to become aware of our biases, our stereotypes. And I think like one example is oftentimes when I tell people, a couple people I've told, you know, that I teach the Bible, or when I mention things about the Bible, they'll tell me I remind them of their dad. You know, that happened a couple times actually. So one person left the Bible study because I reminded her of her dad. And then it was a few weeks ago I saw a video, a pastor was saying that's common. Pastors will trigger your emotion, you know, of the person's dad, and so they'll portray the person's dad onto them, and so we want to be aware of our biases and our stereotypes. And then lastly, the last way to avoid conflict is to come up with rules of fair play. So if you're in a close relationship with someone, you can come up with some rules and say, hey, okay, we won't ever do this. We won't ever say that. Have a discussion, come up with an agreement. Someone was talking about the other week about how, you know, in the hood, they used to do the dozens, or they used to call it capping. They would talk about each other. You know, you just go back and forth talking about each other. But, you know, sometimes they would say, okay, no mamas, no mamas. So it's like, okay, you can't talk about the person's mama. So come up with some rules of engagement before, you know, that these things are off limits. You know, maybe you can never threaten divorce, or you can never do, you know, so come up with some rules of engagement that are off limits, and that'll help avoid conflict. Because you know what's gonna trigger you. If somebody says this, then, and they, you know, somebody that knows you well is eventually gonna know what's gonna trigger you. And so when they get angry, they're just gonna go right to that trigger, to that pain point that's painful in you. So come up with rules of engagement to say, okay, no matter how bad it gets, we can't talk about this. We can't bring this into it. All right, so those are ways to avoid conflict. Any thoughts on those?
You know, Michael, I find that a lot of people that have a lot of triggers, they're kind of like what that woman was talking about. She knows how to define it, but when it comes to a real situation, they don't seem to know how to deal with it. It seems like, excuse me, it seems like every single thing in the past just kind of vomits out. That's the way I see it, you know. It looks good when she's telling you calmly that you need to avoid that. These are the rules of engagement. This is what I would do. But then if you see her interact with other people in a real situation, you see them have a major explosion. I've seen that with many, many people.
Yeah.
Not only on little things, but like, you know, like let's say a traffic ticket. You know, they would just vomit to their other friends. This is what they did unfairly. You only hear one side of it, and people would favor her or favor him. You know, but it seems like that type of trigger, they're kind of stuck with it. That type of injury never really heals for those kind of people, even though academically they tell you that these are the things I need to do. I've done that. I've gotten better, but they seem to vomit back out when it comes to reality. That's the way I've seen so far.
Yeah, we all have triggers. Some people have, more triggered than others. You know, people have been through traumatic events, and a lot of people haven't healed from it. A lot of people haven't healed, and there's some people that can get triggered by small things, and there are some that are aware of their triggers, but they haven't managed it yet. Like you mentioned, there are some that are aware of it, but they don't have it under control. So like being aware of it is a step towards it, but they haven't gotten it under control yet. Were you gonna say something,
All,
Chris?
all triggers are not bad triggers. Some triggers are associated with self-preservation. It's, you know, so they're not all bad. Some of them will save your life.
Well, I think all triggers are actually associated with self-preservation. It's just some of them, like sometimes we'll have a defense that we did as a child, and as an adult, it's just not appropriate to do. You know, it's like, okay, when somebody says something I don't like, I'm gonna yell and scream and throw a tantrum to get attention. And so now when they're in the store and they can't get a discount, they got to raise their voice and start yelling, what, you know, but they you know, and it worked fine as a child, and it was for a specific reason. So some triggers are appropriate and they're self-preservation. And if there's, so it's sort of like anger, you know, anger is there for a reason. Your emotions are there to tell us that something could be wrong, something is a threat. Yeah. And so if you're properly interpreting that, then things are okay. But if you're associating things as a threat, shouldn't really be a big deal, then it's a problem. So yeah, that's a good point.
Trigger.
Yeah. So it's just, you shouldn't be triggered by stuff that's not really an issue. But we're working on it. We're working on it.
Yeah, I think especially if it happens over and over again. It's like you haven't healed.
Yeah.
And it's like you're getting something out of reacting the way that you do. And it's like you should be past this, someone might say or think. Because, you know, we discussed this before. But some people like to remain stuck in those situations because they're getting something out of it. And until they can figure out what it is that they get out of being triggered, then they can't move forward. Right,
yeah. I mean, it's sort of like, you know, addictions. It's like, okay, I get depressed, so now I turn to alcohol or do this. It's like, it's not, it's just, you have that hurt or that void, and so this is where you've turned in the past. This is what worked for you in the past to escape or to avoid it, and so now this is what you turn to. And so, and you may realize that, okay, this is damaging my life. These reactions, these blow-ups, I keep ending up in jail, I keep losing relationships. So you realize the consequences are bad, but you don't have the presence of mind to stop it ahead of time. And so, yeah, so it's something you should be working on, especially if you have a pattern, of it. And if it's not giving you the results in life that you want, you might want to look at it. You know, if you keep having the same type of issues, you keep ended up in jail, you keep ending up, oh, I got to go back and apologize because of what I did, or then you need to, look at it. You need to look at trying to change something.
Why do I like going to jail? Basically, that's what you got to figure. What you're getting something out of it. You know what the consequence is. So why do I keep doing it? It's something that I'm getting out of it that promotes me to keep doing it.
Right.
So until I figure out what those rewards are for me, it maybe it's attention from someone or I don't know, but you're getting something out of it. Otherwise, you can move on. You can move on from it.
It's the 3 meals a day and having a bed to sleep in.
What was that?
For jail, probably the 3 meals.
Oh, right, exactly. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it could be just because it's a place, it's a shelter, and it's a bed to sleep in. I get fed, and I don't have to worry about anything. I'm taken care of. Exactly.
Right, and sometimes it's not necessary you want it. Some people have self-destructive behavior. I get in a situation where things are going too good. Oh, something's gonna go wrong, and so they they make something go wrong. Oh, this is going too good. Something's going to go wrong, and so they make something go wrong, or just yeah. So it's not. You may not want the actual consequence, or maybe just the reaction is how you know to react, and the result of that reaction lands you with the consequences. But yeah,
Or it could be blame. I'm just thinking of a situation. It could be blame. You're holding someone else accountable for your triggers, and the payoff for you is you get to hold that person responsible, and you're punishing them each time, and you can't move on because you can't find forgiveness with them. So yeah, so you punish them with your anger to these triggers.
yeah,
And you've had many discussions about it and you're aware of it, but you won't move on because you're still punishing that person.
yeah, yeah. Or it's like why do they keep making me do this? You won't accept the blame. You're the victim. You're the victim.
Yeah, you play the victim. Yeah, playing the victim. Yeah, that's the payoff. Playing the victim. But then by paying the victim, you're making the other person feel guilty about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a
I
possibility.
wouldn't be like this. My life wouldn't be like this if you hadn't done what you did.
Yeah. You don't want to take any accountability for any part of it. Yeah.
Right.
Hey, Michael, I think we're talking about a lot of the external triggers because there's also internal triggers as well. But triggers is a very difficult word. It's really someone that's experienced some sort of trauma for the external and internal triggers. Usually that's something, a traumatic experience something they experienced previous in their life that was traumatic, which is whatever external and internally brought up that emotion. It's usually related to some sort of trauma. So when I hear the word trigger, I think of mental health, and I think of what that person might, or even myself, have experienced in the past that brought up those emotions. But for me, it is a very sensitive topic because it is related to someone's mental health and really something affected them that valid to where whether someone says something to them or something reminds them, like she mentioned, like the dog or something like that. Those things right there are something that they haven't necessarily been able to address, right?
Yeah.
PTSD and all that type of stuff.
Right.
But yeah, trigger is a really difficult feeling for someone to experience. Is my point. So it's just for me. I tend to, when I see someone who's triggered, I tend to try to have some sort of compassion for them. I'm really trying to understand where that's coming from.
Right.
But one lesson I learned too, I saw a woman I saw. She used to tell people, "Oh, you're being triggered right now," trying to define their emotions, and that's inappropriate as well to tell someone that they're triggered. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. I think those are good points. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's often based on trauma, and it's good to have compassion because you may never know what the issue was, but you have to realize there's usually some hurt underneath somewhere, and it's not really, it's not really up to you to figure out what the issue is, but if we can, realize that there's some hurt there and have some compassion. That's a good point. Let's see. And then finally, we talked about 3 unhealthy communication practices. The first unhealthy practice was the silent treatment or stonewalling. Yeah. So some people, when when you're going into an argument, they give you the silent treatment. So it's where they don't respond, they don't talk, or either they'll give you the bare minimum responses. How was your day? I'm sorry. They'll give you the bare minimum, so they stop communication with you. And so some reasons we talked about people do it. Some do it as retaliation. So you hurt me, so I'm going to hurt you back. Other people give you the silent treatment as manipulation. They want you to give in to what they're asking you to do. And so they'll give you the silent treatment till you give in. Other people do the silent treatment because physiologically flooded. So their situation is causing them so much stress that they go into fight or flight. There's fight, flight, and there's freeze. And so they basically go into freeze. They just are frozen because of all the stress and anxiety of the situation. And so we talked about the fact that if you're doing it out of retaliation or manipulation, and then it's passive aggressive, then that's a toxic communication practice. So if you're giving a silent treatment as retaliation, you're trying to hurt the other person, or you're trying to get them to do what you want, then that's a toxic communication practice. And then we also talked about there are some other situations where people may be silent. I don't know if they're necessarily the silent treatment, but people may be silent to avoid conflict, so they just don't want the conflict to escalate. People may be silent because they're trying not to blow up. So they know if they say something, they're going to start yelling and screaming too. So they just keep quiet, not to say anything. And other times people may be silent just because they're processing what's going on, and they're trying to just think at the situation, and they don't necessarily know what to say, or they're processing what's going on. And so that was the silent treatment. Any thoughts on that? Okay. We got to move it. So the other two unhealthy communication practices are contempt. So contempt is a criticism that comes from an element of superiority. One person expresses discontent by using shame or mean-spirited sarcasm to put down the other person. So people use contempt as a communication style. You're putting the other person down, shaming them, and it's sort of you're doing it from a feeling of superiority. So the solution is to describe, instead of telling another person you should do this, you that, describe your own feelings and describe your needs. So we talked about a method where you can say, I feel this when you do that. So I feel angry, I feel hurt, I feel disappointed when you do this. I feel ignored when you use your cell phone at dinner. And then you could add to that, I feel this when you do that, I wish. So you can add to express the desired result you want. I feel disappointed when you didn't trust me with that information. I wish you would share, I wish we could calmly talk about our schedules. So you're talking about how you felt when they did the action and what you wish they would do instead. So you can communicate it directly instead of communicating it in a superior, talking down to them. You need to do this. You need to do this. You should stop doing that. And the next unhealthy communication practice is defensiveness. So defensiveness is when you get real or perceived criticism, and then you start, maybe you got to criticize back, or you start over explaining, or we talked about you take the victim mentality. Defense, you got to take the victim mentality. So we should be open to criticism, but we want to take responsibility for the part that we did. So don't necessarily just, if someone's discussing something, don't just jump defensive where you got to defend your situation and over-explain. Accept what you did and go from there. So Proverbs 28:13 says, one who conceals his wrongdoing will not prosper, but one who confesses and abandons them will find compassion. So defensiveness. All right. So that's the last lesson. All right. That's the last lesson. So we will we'll get to today's lesson. So we'll start off talking about some of the reasons why we have conflict. So we have conflict all the time. So the three main reasons we have conflict. Number one is limited resources. So they're limited resources. So it's conflict over time, conflict over money, conflict over property. So a conflict, the root cause is over some limited resource. The second reason is there's some unmet need or expectation. So unmet need or expectation. So that could be a physical need, an emotional need, a mental need, a spiritual need. It causes conflict. And then the third most common reason is we have different values. We have different values than the other person. So when we have different values, that's when we get the shoulds. You know, you should do this. You should have done that. You should do this. They should have thought this way. They shouldn't wear that. They shouldn't do this. They shouldn't behave that way. They shouldn't drink that. They shouldn't. So it's like it's values. You have your values. You have different. So you're the conflict because of your values. And so in order to avoid conflict, what we need to balance between our emotions, our logic, and empathy. And so we talked about our emotions. So our emotions are good because as Chris mentioned, our emotions help us identify what our values are. So if something gets you angry, you know, it can help you identify. It's because there was something I valued. I valued communication. I valued respect. So something, when your emotion, when your emotion gets triggered, it can help you identify what it is that you valued. And we talked about that, your pride, your reputation, other people's opinion. Maybe it's you valued other people's opinion and someone, you know, hurt your reputation. So your emotions tell you what you value, or they can tell you that there's something that needs to change. You know, someone keeps doing something, your emotions, you have an emotional reaction. Something needs to change, or it's identifying some value. But then we also need to we can't just react with our emotions. You know, so as we talked about triggers, it's kind of you're responding from your emotion. But we also need to use logic. We need to use logic. So logic helps us identify the root of the conflict. And logic also helps us address the challenge. So we can get emotionally triggered, but then the logic can say, okay, wait a minute. Is this really that big of an issue? You know, is this really that big of a deal? You know, they honked at me. Is this really a big deal? You know, so use logic. Logic can help the situation. You know, they're behind me, they honked. Is this really a big deal? So you need to bring logic in. But then we also need to bring in empathy. So we need to bring in empathy. We need to understand how are they affected by this situation, and we need to validate them for feeling that way as well. So we need to use our emotions. Our emotions help us identify what's wrong, but we also need to use logic, and we also need to bring in empathy. So our emotions, logic, and empathy, we need to bring all of those into our reactions. Because, you know, when you're in a conflict, you're never in a neutral situation. You're always seeing your side of the story. All right. Any thoughts?
Yeah, the transition there, I kind of got lost with my notes. We start off, it's like why we have conflict.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And
right.
then somehow it seems like I got off track because one of the why we have conflict. We have different values, and because of unmet needs.
Right. And limited resources.
Right. And what was the other?
Limited resources.
What kind of resources?
Limited.
Oh, limited resources.
Yeah, like time, money, property.
You know, some people are very headstrong also too. That makes it a little more difficult.
Pride, yeah.
You know, based on their pride and what they believe. And so in that conversation, it's a one-way conversation. Your goal is to listen to what I have to say to you because this is what's happening. It's affecting me because of you, and they're so headstrong to the point you're going. I can see why your ex-husband or your ex-wife or your co-workers or your neighbors really give you the silent treatment. They don't want to deal with you, not because they're afraid. It's just that you're a complete headache, you know.
Yeah.
I don't, thank God I'm not married to you or your neighbor or your tenant, or your manager or your coworker. You're just so difficult, they're so headstrong. I mean, I've worked with people that you can't tell why I guess you could tell after this class. You could tell what was triggering them, and you're going, oh my God, you need some therapy besides medication, and it's real hard to deal with that. They only have one-sided effect, with that. They can't be in the middle. They can't be objective, like if they got stopped with a traffic ticket, the police is always wrong. I wasn't like this. In the court of law, the judge will side with the police, because he is the man of justice, regardless, But the thing is that people are just so headstrong on everything, even with their at work. They'll blame their boss. My boss is like this. They're like this. It seems like I can't tell whether sometimes they're playing victim, but a very aggressive victim mentality, So, I think headstrong kind of adds on to that too, with that type of mentality.
Yeah. And so,
Can I go back?
okay.
Okay, this was this clarity I was trying to establish.
Okay.
All right, so why we have conflict, I think those three things. And then
Okay.
you started mentioning these terms, empathy, emotion, and logic. Now, how does that fit in? What were
Oh,
what were you
that's
explaining?
that's explaining, I guess, how to avoid conflict, or just kind of the way to look at a scenario, the way to look at a scenario. So not just to look at it from your emotions. So the way to address a conflict, or to view a conflict, or to respond in a situation. When the situations happen, you don't want to just, so your emotions are good that you have them. It may tell you that there's something wrong, but you don't want to just use your emotions.
Okay.
You have
So
to,
these were,
so they, I guess it could have been a different category of why we have conflict. So that could have been a separate category.
but you said these are ways to.
These are ways to look at a situation, look at a scenario.
Okay, to avoid conflict.
To avoid conflict, and just to how to clearly view a situation.
Oh,
And so
okay.
kind of let, like Chris said, there are some times when there needs to be conflict, but this will kind of let you know whether there needs to be or not. So, you use logic and also use empathy. You're caring for the other person.
Got it. Now I got it. Okay.
If somebody spills coffee on your shoe and you see that they're, physically handicapped and challenged, then you don't start any conflict. you let it go.
Okay.
So you want to use empathy. You want to use logic as well.
Okay. So I got a heading for that now, man. So
Okay.
it's ways to view. It's ways to view.
I guess the
possible
situation. Yeah. There you go.
possible conflict.
Yeah. Okay. So now we'll look at God's model on resolving conflict. I started not to put this in here, but it was like I couldn't really do conflict and not teach on this passage. So here we go. We'll see. Haven't seen this fully modeled too much, but Matthew 18:15-17. Matthew 18:15-17. It says, "Now if your brother sins, go and show him his fault in private. If he listens to you, you have gained a brother. But if he does not listen to you, take one or two more with you, so that on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, every matter may be confirmed. And if he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen to the church, he is to be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector.
Yeah.
So God's outlining, so Jesus is outlining a model of conflict resolution. So the first step is to go to the person alone. Go to the person alone directly and talk about the issue. The second step is that if that doesn't resolve it, to take 2 or 3 other people with you to try to resolve the issue. So it's probably going to be people they trust as well, not just your buddies. Don't just go get your crew and just the person. People that they trust as well.
You're one, Mike.
That's more likely.
They're gonna got your boy. And then the third one, it says to take it to the church. Obviously, it's assuming you're dealing with a believer.
A real believer.
Yeah, and the fourth one is to break away with relationship from the person. And so the goal for this is not to put the person on trial, but to reconcile, to resolve the issue. The goal is to resolve the issue.
How much of a severity go to this? I mean, I read one time where there was a shooting where the guy would just let his dog out on the lawn and it would just pee and poop on that guy's lawn. And it's been going on like that to the point that he went over and said, listen, hey, your dog is like this. I mean, something that could be very minor that the guy could have, resolved by picking it up. The owner that is, or maybe not let the dog go to that area, could have been resolved. But it just got escalated to the point that he went over and shot him.
Shot the dog, I assume?
No, the owner.
He shot the owner.
Yeah, he told the owner. Owner goes, well, I had no control over my dog. Sure you do. I mean, you don't just go let your dog go in someone's yard and just poop, even though it's very familiar to them. So, so he went over and that guy, they exchanged a bunch of language, of course. And then next thing you know, he pulled the gun out and just shot him in the chest. I remember that.
Man.
Yeah.
That's...
So how far do you use that method as far as approach him? That don't work. Bring your crew, the hunting crew, over to let him know.
So
you can't bring your personal friends into something like that. That's something you have to go professionally to a arbitrator or something.
Well, I mean,
unless you brought some other neighbors who are maybe they're experiencing the same thing, but
So the scenario outline is your brother sins against you. So first it's talking about sin. As far as it, so it's talking about sin. It's not talking about pooping on the lawn.
Yeah.
But I mean, we can discuss the outline in general. So let's go step by step. So first,
we're talking secular, not within a Christian environment, right?
No, we're talking about in a Christian environment.
Okay, all right, go.
We're going to go step by step in a Christian environment. So in a Christian environment, so in any environment, the first step is to go to the other person first, regardless of the environment, is you want to go to the person first. The first line of reconciliation is go to the person first. So why do people often go to other people first why do people often go to other people first instead of going to the person first?
They like to vent, and it's a mixture of gossip and slander, because you're one-sided, right? And so people that favors you will be on your side. They'll listen to what you have to say, and you sometimes you can't be objective because that person is already stressed out, so you can't reason with that. So you just kind of listen and go, yeah, nod your head, that type of thing.
Yeah, but also that cut. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's true. That's good. Yeah, yeah. Event, gossip. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that also causes division. Because if you're doing this in the biblical and church matter, this can cause division if you're going to your favorite people. That causes division right off the bat because they're gonna take your side on it, and then when you deal with the other person, they're gonna have their people with them. That just causes whole chaos, and it puts the whole church in chaos.
Yeah.
Unless we gotta find somebody that is really neutral and understands the scripture, understands what this scripture means.
Yeah. Yeah. Causes division.
Yeah.
Causes division. And so the reason, so let's step back. The reason people go to other people, one is to complain.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to get back to the division. So they do it to complain. They do it to vent. They do it to gain advocates, so to get people on their side. They want to plead their case.
Yeah.
Sometimes they may want to just justify their emotion. I should be heard. I should feel, but they want they want to feel justified in their hurt, or they're not liking the person. And then other times they do it to slander, to damage the other person's reputation. They want to get back at the other person by damaging the other person's reputation. So those are some reasons why people go to other people. But Jesus is telling us not to go to other people. He's telling us to first go to that person directly.
Yeah.
So
I could see where a person could go and ask another person in a church to say, "Look, am I being reasonable?"
Yeah.
Just to get an opinion about myself and what I'm thinking about this other person.
Yeah.
So just to see if I'm being of sound mind.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've done that.
Yeah.
So that may be the case that you want to see if. So it's not you're trying to justify your dislike of the person. You're trying to determine if maybe I'm taking this out of proportion. Maybe I shouldn't even be going that way. So so that is another reason that some people may do it. Yeah, and so the first step to addressing it, you want to go to the person alone privately, but you're going to the person alone with the goal of restoring it. So you're not going to make them feel bad. You're not necessarily going for an apology. You're not going to win. And so this is not to say that, okay, you're reconciling now and you've forgiven necessarily, because forgiving may come later. If somebody, you loan somebody $400, they didn't pay you back. It's not, I've forgiven the debt, I'm going back to them to reconcile. So no, it may be you're going to them and you're saying, hey, you said you'd give it to me Thursday, today is Friday. So it's not necessarily that you're forgiving the debt, but you're going to reconcile. You're going to solve the issue, to reconcile the issue. So you're going to reconcile the issue. You're not going to make them feel bad. You're not going to get an apology. You're not trying to win, but you're trying to resolve the issue. You're trying to come to a resolution. You're trying to reconcile the issue is the goal of going to the person. So that's the first step. And then if that doesn't work, Jesus is saying you can bring in others. But we also want to keep in mind 1 Peter 4:8. Who has 1 Peter 4:8? Oh, it's Chris.
I got that one, Mike.
Okay.
Hang on a second. Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers a multitude of sins.
All right. So love covers a multitude of sins. So if you love the person, you're not trying to expose everything they did or damage them. You're going to cover what they did. I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago. He was talking about some stuff he was going through, and he was like, well, there's other stuff that happened, but I'm not going to expose what she did. He said, I'd rather have people, looking at me badly than looking at her. I'm not going to say, I'm just going to talk about the stuff I did. I'm not going to put her side out, because I'd rather have them looking at me bad than at her. So if it's love, you want to cover the other person's sin. You're not trying to expose what the other person did. So before you go into other people, you know, we're trying to cover the other person's sin as much as possible. But there are benefits to bringing someone else. So if you bring someone else, you're going to stay talking about the main thing. You're not going to get off on a tangent about 3 Christmases ago you stepped on my elf or something. You're not going to get off on a tangent if you bring somebody else there. So there are some benefits to it, bringing in others. But then, as Peter mentioned, though, when we go to discuss it with others, we want to make sure we're not gossiping. Mm-hmm. So who has Proverbs 20 and 19?
I got that one also.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
A gossip betrays a confidence, so avoid a man who talks too much.
Right. A gossip betrays a confidence, so avoid a man who talks too much. So it's telling you to avoid gossipers. If someone is a gossiper, to avoid them. And so you don't want to be gossiping. You're not telling other people to gossip, to just tell them for no reason. You're telling them for the reason to help with the reconciliation. The goal is to help with the reconciliation. But is it when someone starts to tell us gossip, why do we rarely stop people who start to tell us gossip? Someone says, "Hey, did you hear what Sister so-and-so did?"
Something like that usually sways your intention from the beginning. And I've seen that with a lot of people. Some people are very persuasive, and they give a lot of facts. And because they favor their personality, those people end up being on their side, and you're going, wow, they're kind of like playing politics in a way, if you think about that,
But you're saying as a receiver of that gossip, why do we not stop it?
Yeah.
That's what I thought you were saying,
Yeah.
Because we're nosy.
Yeah.
No one else.
Yeah.
What's going on in our lives? We want to get in everybody else's business. Yeah.
Because we're nosy. Yeah. We want to know. People nowadays, reality shows are popular. I'm going to sit at home and watch somebody else on TV have some drama.
Yeah. It could be scripted sometimes too.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch what somebody wrote for this person's drama. That's how much I want to just see what else. Yeah, because we're nosy. We want to know. So we don't stop the gossip. So who has Proverbs 26:22?
The words of a gossip are like choice morsels. They go down to the inmost parts.
Yeah, the words of a gossip are like choice morsels. It's like, oh, you want to know. I want to hear, so did what? What they do?
Spill all the tea.
Because like we want to know. But we should shut it down. We should shut it down. I don't know if you guys remember Norma used to be in the class. She was actually good at that. She would tell people that doesn't sound positive, and like I'm gonna stop you right there. Like that doesn't sound positive. But I rarely have seen that, especially in church.
Yeah.
Especially in church, you don't see people shutting down somebody trying to tell them about somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you hear what Pastor did? What?
Well, some people use the technique of just walking away.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they do.
Yeah. That's a good technique.
Yes, it is. Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. So we only want to talk to people who are going to either be part of the problem or part of the solution. Mm-hmm. We want to talk to people who are going to be either part of the problem. Who were part of the problem, or people who are going to be part of the solution. So we're trying to restore the reputation. So when someone comes to you with information, you have to determine what's their motive. What's their motive for bringing this information to you? So who has Proverbs 10:18? Oh yeah, I think you did.
Oh, I I do. Sorry about that. I was trying to unmute. It says, hiding hatred makes you a liar. Slandering others make you a fool. So hiding hatred makes you a liar. Slandering others make you a fool.
Right. So hiding hatred makes you a liar. So if you're telling somebody what happened, but you really hate the other person, but you're trying to hide it, trying to make it sound like you're impartial, but you're swaying them, it makes you a liar. And slandering, speaking bad about somebody else, makes you a fool. So the Bible is pretty harsh on. So we shouldn't. So if the person is coming to you, and it seems that their motive is just to, why are they telling you this? If their motive is to gossip, is their motive to slander, to hurt the other person, or is their motive reconciliation? So what is the motive for this person coming and telling me this? So you need to kind of determine that when somebody comes and tells you some information. Because if it's clear that the purpose they're coming to you is to damage the other person, then you need to consider that in your listening, and in your responding to the situation. I used to lead another group. There was a single group, and there was a lot of drama in there. And I remember once somebody came the first time they came. They said, "What church do you go to?" I said, "ALCF." And they're like, "Oh, do you know so and so?" Named a brother I knew. Yes. Oh, and then went on to start telling me about when they used to date him and all of this stuff, and it was like, this is the first interaction I had with the person. And so it was like, okay, and so I was like, okay, I know that this person is going to be trouble. It's like, I don't, that may be true what they're saying, and that's surprising, but I know that this person is going to be trouble. This is the first thing, I just found out their name, and now they're found out what church I went to, and they went straight to talking about somebody who goes to that church. It's like, okay, I know this person is going to be trouble. And they were trouble. So you need to discern what the motive is that the person is coming to you with. And then as somebody mentioned, you don't want to just judge from one side of the story. So you got one side of the story. You can't really make a judgment. You can't make a judgment now that you only have one side of the story. Who has Proverbs 18:17?
I do.
Okay.
In a lawsuit, the first to speak seems right until someone comes forward and cross-examines.
All right. So the first person to speak seems right. So the person who tells you, they tell you what happened.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I can't believe it. Yeah, they seem like it seems right. But yeah, until the other person tells you their side, then it's like, wait a minute. You didn't mention all of that.
Yeah.
You didn't mention you slapped their mama. No. So you got one side of the story. You can't come to a complete judgment. So there are reasons to bring other people in. And then Jesus says, okay, if you bring the other people in, so I haven't seen this modeled a lot, but once you bring the other people in, then you bring it to the church.
Yeah.
So we don't see that often in evangelical churches. You see that in other churches like Jehovah's Witness and Mormons. They'll bring somebody up before the church, as far as I understand. But he says to bring them up before the church. So this is specifically an example where there was sin. So there's specifically sin involved. And he says if they don't change their ways, then you cast them out. You cast them out, basically. You break relationship with them. And so there is one incident where Paul does this. There was an incident in the church in Corinth where there was a man who was sleeping with his stepmother. So who has 1 Corinthians 5:1-2?
I do. It is actually reported that there is a sexual immorality among you, and of a kind that even pagans do not tolerate. A man is sleeping with his father's wife, and you are proud. Shouldn't you rather have gone into mourning and have put out of your fellowship the man who has been doing this?
So this was an example of Paul acting out the breaking the relationship completely from the church. And so there's conflict, and so the I guess the main thing we want to take out of it is go to the other person first. Go to the other person first. You know, in any group, in any organization, there's going to be conflict. You know, in this class, there's been conflict, a lot of conflict. Men with men, women with women, women with men, there's conflict. But go to the other person first, try to resolve it, and then only bring in someone else in order to resolve it, to help resolve it. All right, any thoughts? So I have seen this acted out when the sin was done by a pastor. That's kind of the only place I've seen it acted out in our church, where the sin was done by a pastor, and then
I had to do it when I was leading a men's group.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Years ago, I had to take an individual because he was so disruptive to the group.
Oh,
and,
okay.
Some men would say, "Listen, I'm not going to come if he's going to be there." And yeah, so because of that kind of disruption and him not continuing to do it, I had to go to him first and tell him, and then I arranged for us to meet with two other brothers. We met privately in a room there at the church to resolve it. And some things he was aware of, some of it he wasn't. Yeah, so we brought it to his attention. And he received it fairly well. And that's the thing about, as brothers, we should learn to be teachable.
Amen.
We have to learn to be teachable. And that was one of the things I think we brought up in the meeting. And so the conflict was resolved. Yeah, he became very well aware of it, and then some improvements were definitely made. It was kind of personality style, but improvements were made. But he needed to be made aware that he was being so disruptive and he was causing other men not to attend because of his behavior.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So that's the situation. Yeah, I've had situations where people have said, if this person comes, then I'm not going to come. And you know, and it's kind of like, well, I don't know, it's one, but then it's like, okay, after the third or fourth person says, if that person comes, I'm not going to come. It's like, okay, now I gotta address it some way or another. But yeah. All right, so some strategies. So now we'll look at some strategies, how to, when you do address the one-on-one. So now we're going to focus on when you go address the person, what are some strategies to do? So the first strategy is, well, I guess before addressing it, is to determine, to pray. Yeah, so as we mentioned in the reconciliation, go to God. So the 11 reconciliation steps apply here. So I took those out. And then the first one is to determine, can you overlook the offense?
I'm sorry.
Did you say, to determine, can you overlook the offense? Who has Proverbs 19:11?
I think I do.
Okay.
All right. 19:11.
Yes.
A person's wisdom yields patience. It is one's glory to overlook an offense.
Right. So wisdom gives patience or makes you slow to anger. It's to your glory to overlook an offense.
Yeah.
So the first thing to do is to overlook it. If you're offended, can you overlook it? And so the closer you get to God, the more you can overlook, you know. So if you're in traffic, somebody cuts you off, you're in a grocery store, if you're standing in line at Starbucks, can you overlook it? You know, I'm sure there are many times, you know, they said Jesus could hear the people's thoughts. So somebody is like, you know, he's going to heal somebody and somebody's thinking, ooh, those are some ugly sandals. You know, I don't think Jesus stopped and was like, hey, you talk about my sandals. We want to just overlook, you know, there's some stuff you can overlook. So some stuff you can overlook. But then the overlooking it means that you're actually can put it aside, and it's not like you're festering on it 2 weeks later and thinking about it. So if you're festering on it 2 weeks later and thinking about it, that means you couldn't overlook it. You know, and if you're bringing it up the next time there's an argument, that means you couldn't overlook it. So the first thing is to grow to the point where it's something we can overlook. But if we can't overlook it and it's an important relationship, then we want to address it. So you want to address it. You know, if you're going to be bringing it up the next time you have an argument, then you should be addressing it now. You know, so if overlook it if you can. It's to your glory to overlook it. But overlooking it doesn't mean just not saying anything right now. Overlooking it means you let it go. You know, somebody cut you off in traffic, you should be able to let it go. You shouldn't be mad about it 2 weeks from now. You know, somebody, you know, stepped on your tennis shoes and it wasn't on purpose. You shouldn't be mad at it 3 weeks from now. So you should be able to let some stuff go. But if you can't, and the relationship is important, then you want to address it. So then we'll talk about how to address it. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make the first move, face-to-face if possible. Face-to-face if possible, we want to address it. So make the first move. We want to start with affirmation. Who has Proverbs 15:18?
I'll take it, Michael. You said 15:18?
Yes.
A hot-tempered person stirs up conflict, but the one who is patient claims a quarrel.
All right. Yeah. Hot-tempered person stirs up strong conflict. The one who's mind says slow to anger calms a dispute. The one is patient. So one is slow to anger. So yes, you want to be slow to anger. We also want to start with affirmation. So you want to begin the don't start off negatively. Don't start off angry. Don't start off yelling. Don't start off. There's a study that says the first 3 minutes of a conversation, no matter how long it goes, pretty much determines the outcome of it. If the first 3 minutes were hostile, the outcome is usually going to be bad. So you want to start out positive. Start out, don't start off confrontational. Don't start off yelling. So your energy is contagious. Your feeling, your mood, your attitude. So if you're going into it hostile, then it's going to be hard to come out with a positive resolution. So go in with a calm energy, with positive energy, or at least a neutral energy. Third, you want to communicate your complaints and feelings without fixed judgment or interpretation. You want to communicate your complaints and feelings without fixed judgment or interpretation. So if I'm talking about me and my feelings, I'm complaining. If I'm talking about you and your behavior, I'm criticizing. So I want to talk about me and my feelings. So you don't want to try to interpret the other person's motive. So you don't want to try to tell them why they were doing it. You don't want to tell them what they are. You don't want to label them. You don't want to tell them their motive. Don't tell them, you don't care about anybody but yourself. So you don't want to tell them why they were doing it. You want to tell them what they were doing, address what they were doing. Because once you start doing the global complaints, then they're going to get on the defense. So you want to give specific complaints. You told me you were going to take out the trash and you didn't. You know, that makes me feel stressed out because I got a lot to do, and it violates my trust because you said you would do it. Versus, you never do anything around here. All the responsibility is always on me. You take advantage of me all the time. So we don't want to make these global complaints. You know, address the specific issue at the time it happens instead of labeling the person, you're a this, you're a that, you always this, you never that. Address the specific issue. So the practical steps, you want to express what they noticed, express what was an issue, express how it made you feel, and express what you need them to do about it. So don't just call them a name, you know, so that we want to learn. So I need to learn to do this as well, you know, to communicate. So I want to express what I noticed, express how it made me feel, and express what I want them to do. So that's the point in this traits of wholeness. We want to be able to maturely communicate our wants, needs, and desires. This is what you did. This is how it made me feel. This is what I need you to do. I mean, you don't have to use those words, doing whatever words you use, but that's overall what we want to express. Next, we want to speak the truth in love. Who has Proverbs 12:18?
I do.
Okay.
The thoughts of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing.
All right, say it one more time.
The words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing.
All right. The words of the reckless thrust like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. So, how you say it. So we want to tell the truth. So we don't want to necessarily withhold the truth to try to control their reaction, but we want to do it with love. We don't want to. So, you know, so some people, I just keep it 100. I just tell it like it is. Mm-hmm. You know, well, that's also called being rude. You know, we want to speak the truth with love. So you can speak the truth, but you want to do it in a manner that's loving and respectful. Mm-hmm. So you're never persuasive when you're abrasive. This is Rick Warren. You never get your point across by being cross. So truth without love is resisted. Truth with love is received. So we want to speak the truth in love. Speak the truth in love. So how you say it is important.
Who is that? Rick Warren said,
You are never persuasive when you are abrasive.
Oh, that's good.
And he also said, you never get your point across by being cross. Okay. And next, we want to fix the problem, not the blame. So your goal is to solve the problem. The goal isn't necessarily to let them realize it's not your fault, or to make them say that it's their fault. You know, let's fix the issue. You know, it doesn't matter whose fault it was. Let's fix the issue. You don't need to fix the blame. Fix the issue. And see, as we mentioned, we want to be slow to anger. Next one is slow to anger. Who has Proverbs 12:29?
14:29, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mean 14:29, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you said 12. It says, people with understanding control their anger. A hot temper shows great foolishness.
All right.
People with understanding control their anger. A hot temper shows great foolishness.
Mm-hmm. So we want to control our anger. We want to be able to control our anger and not display great foolishness. Next, we want to listen to them. We want to listen to them. Who has Proverbs 18:2?
I got it. Fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinions.
All right. Fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing. So it's using the word fool a lot. It's using the word fool a lot in here. So you don't want to find just pleasure in your understanding. You know, they don't find any pleasure in understanding. They don't want to hear the other person's side of view. They don't want to understand why the person thought they were right. They just want to air their own opinion. So we don't want to be a fool. We want to understand the other person's point of view. You know.
Understand the other person's point of view.
Yes.
Oh, sorry about that, Mike. I'm reciting in my phone.
Oh.
What scripture was that, Mike?
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm using a dictation on my phone. So everything you say, I forgot I didn't unmute. So everything you say, I'm repeating it.
Oh, that's okay.
So,
I thought he was
adding all your comments to it. Sorry about that.
I thought you were emphasizing it.
No, sorry about that.
That's Proverbs 18:2. Proverbs 18:2. A fool does not delight in understanding, but in revealing his own mind. And additionally, there's Proverbs 18:13. Who has?
I have that. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay.
Let me kind of put my phone away. Spouting off before listening to the facts is both shameful and foolish. So that's one version. Spouting off before listening to the facts is both shameful and foolish. Another version says that he who answers a matter before he hears it, this is folly and disgrace to him.
Proverbs 18:13. Yeah. So if you spout off before you heard the other person's side, it's folly and disgrace, and it's shameful and it's foolish. So you want to hear the other person's point of view. So you want to put your agenda on hold and let them say what they got to say. So a lot of times we're just waiting. We're waiting for them to stop so we can say what we're going to say, but we want to actually hear what they're saying. We want to hear what they're saying. You know, we don't want to just wait for them to stop so we can continue to tell them why they're wrong and why they're foolish to not think the way we think.
In high school, I had a teacher that would always tell us, the class, be quiet and let the other person tell you how great they are.
Yeah. And that's how you gain friends. You know, let them tell you. Well, I mean, not during conflict. Well, during conflict too. But yeah. So listen to them. And so as you're listening, a good thing you can do is to reflect what they say. So if they're saying something, you can paraphrase what they say to make sure you heard it right, or you can use their own or repeat their words back to them. Paraphrase what they say, repeat their words back to them. So some validation phrases when they're talking. So they may be saying something, say, oh, when, the reason I kicked your trash can is because it was Tuesday. You could, oh, that makes sense. Well, maybe that doesn't make sense, but some validation phrases you can say if something does make sense. That makes sense. I can see that because such and such. I can understand that because that's a good point. You don't have to throw in the but right away. Yeah. That's a good point. But I was like, oh, that's a good point. Just leave it there and let it go. Oh, that's true. That's true. I use that a lot. Oh, that's true. That's true. And let them continue so they'll feel heard. Because if they don't feel heard, they're not going to really want to hear what you got to say. So now so let them at least feel heard. Then they'll know that it's like, okay, I heard what you said, and I now you're going on, okay, and I disagree with you because this, versus I'm not listening to you, listen to me. So we want to listen and remember that they're in if you're in a confrontation, they're in fight or flight mode. They're, just like you, they're in fight or flight. So remember that so that's the next one. Remember they're in fight or flight because, so be mindful of what you say because they may hear something different than what you said. They're thinking, they're seeing you as the enemy now, so they may mishear what you said. So be mindful of that. They're now in a whole heightened mode. They're on the defensive side. They're in fight or flight. They think you're attacked. They're seeing you as the enemy. So be mindful of what you're saying, realizing that that's the state that they're in.
The free state is when you might say something that shocks someone so much that they can't reply.
Oh, freeze.
Yeah.
It could be that, or it could just be that is your response. So some people, when there's conflict, they want to yell and fight and scream. Other people, they want to run. Some people, they just freeze. Like you start yelling at them, they just freeze up. Like they don't. Like some people just freeze. It's like you're yelling at them, they freeze. Or other people, it's like they need time to process what's going on.
Right.
It's like
They're
like the people who are aggressive and yelling. They respond with their emotions. They say, but there's some people that's like, I got to think about, I don't even really know how I feel about this right now. I got to think about how I feel. Like some people's like, I know I'm mad. I'm yelling. You were wrong. You're an idiot. Other people are like, I got to figure out how I feel about this.
right. Okay. Yeah, sensible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sensible freeze.
Sensible freeze. Yeah. And let's see. And the next one is to seek win-win situation. So it's not you win, they lose. Try to seek a situation where both of you can win. So who has Philippians 2:4?
I do. Not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interest of the others.
Yes.
Right. Do not look at your own interest, but each of you to the interest of the other. So that's tough. That's tough, especially when you're in conflict. That's tough. That's the Jesus in you. Do not merely look at your own interests, but to the interests of others. If you love the person, you should be able to do that. But in the midst of conflict, we need to turn to this. Do not merely look for your own personal interests, but for the interests of others. So you're not trying to get them. You're not trying to win. You're trying to look for their interests as well. What's good for you, what's good for them. It's not just all about you getting what you want. What's good for both of you.
Win-win.
Win-win, yeah.
Hey, Michael, what if you do all that, everything you've done, with not only just prayer, but with a lot of openness before the Lord, and the person is still very, very stubborn, or they just go, you know what, that's the way life is going to be. You just go, I've done the best I can, and just kind of walked away. It's like you said in the beginning. Well, that's not what you said. Sorry.
I think it depends on the relationship. Is this a guy at Starbucks line? Is this your coworker? Is this your spouse? It depends. So first you want to seek peace as far as it depends on you. So you can do everything right and depending on the person. Some people, they're gonna be in conflict all their life. That's all they know is conflict. There's some people that conflict is inevitable. If you're in a relationship with this person, there's gonna be conflict, and they're gonna be selfish, and that's just how it is. But if that's your brother, then you can't just walk away. You just have to deal with it. So it depends. You may limit access. You may that's when you start setting up boundaries. So it depends on the relationship. It depends on the specifics. It depends on the person. If their trauma. It depends on their, what is going on in their life. Maybe. They could be dealing with some horrible things that are putting them in a bad state all the time. So it depends on the specific situation, but 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 there's going to be situations where you did everything you needed to do, but the conflict still can't be resolved in a mature Christian like way. Even like Paul and Barnabas, Paul, they had to split. Paul had to tell him, Mark, we got to go our separate ways. So do all you can do. and
It may not be able to be resolved in one meeting with that person.
Yeah.
And so you can always say, okay, let's stop here and and think about what's been said, and we're going to pray about it before we part ways, and but try and end it in an amicable way, where it's not just emotions and the situation just kind of tossed up and let go.
Yeah.
But come to an agreement that okay, let's think about what we've said, and then get back together tomorrow.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have a long wait and before you meet again. But I would definitely just call it adjourn for that point and pray about it and meet again soon.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, because the emotions or whatever you're, like you said, the person who preaches, they need more time to think about it.
Yeah.
You both need more time. So don't
Yeah.
try to resolve it all
Yeah.
in one meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. You may need multiple meetings. And then the last step is just the last advice is that you may want to address the elephant in the room. So you may be arguing with somebody mad and it's like and things going on and no one's bringing up the fact that okay, everybody's irritable because your mom moved in and she's cussing at us every day. It's like, let's bring up the elephant in the room. Let's bring up the, there's an elephant in the room. So bring up the elephant in the room. Don't just tiptoe around the obvious issue. Don't tiptoe around the obvious issue. Sometimes you got to bring up, okay, this, there's some, we aren't addressing the, there's an obvious issue here that we aren't bringing up.
Yeah.
So bring it up. All right. So those are the steps to addressing conflict. One last thought on conflict is that we often associate the devil with conflict, and we associate God with comfort. But we saw like how the devil tempted Jesus. It was, I can give you this, I can give you that, I can give you that. So sometimes God can use our conflict. Sometimes God can use the battles in our life. Sometimes God can use our conflict to change us. There's a wilderness situation. They needed to be in the wilderness for 40 years in order to change. The guy got them out of Egypt immediately, but it took him 40 years to get Egypt out of them. So sometimes God uses conflict to change us. Sometimes God uses conflict to change us. And so sometimes conflict is needed. Sometimes you need conflict to point out some things in you need to change, to point out some patterns you need to break, to point out some situations you need to leave. So sometimes God can be using conflict to direct you. And also if you don't learn to deal with conflict, and you just leave one place, one relationship, you get into the next one, you have it again because you haven't learned how to deal with conflict. You're just being silent. You have to learn how to deal with conflict. So dealing with conflict is a skill that we need to learn. All right. So that is a lesson. Let's walk in the way. Let's seek the truth and live the life. Any thoughts?
It's
real good, Michael, because I've been taking a lot of notes verbally because I can't type as fast as some people with two thumbs, one thumb. So that's why I'm repeating many things, and I think my cell phone cannot handle any more of your notes, you know. But I'm very, very blessed by putting all these notes in there. Hopefully, get a chance to reread them and kind of think about the many challenges that we deal with, not only just neighbors, culturally, or different groups of people moving into our complexes and into the environment, the people we encounter every day, not only at the gas station, but even co-workers, you know. That makes it a little more difficult to work with. And sometimes it's us, we're causing the conflict. So that this helps, at least for me, to understand a situation rather than just kind of stick the finger out and say, you know, I don't have the problem, you really got the problem, you know? That type of thing. Because I see them pointing fingers all the time. Everybody has a problem except them. But the reality is that when you start looking at it, it goes, I have a problem, but you should really think about yourself too, you know?
Yeah.
So, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, a lot of times we, you know, if there's a pattern, we always have this type of conflict. We need to look at ourselves. You know, so it may not even be that, okay, you're the troublemaker. Maybe it's that you never voiced your opinion, or you never voiced, you know. So it's like try to find out what part you're playing. If it's a cycle, if it's a repeated issue, try to figure out what part in it you're playing, what part you're playing in it, you know. Any other thoughts?
Well, let's see. Like Peter, I was kind of struggling with my notes, but I just saw something here. That limited resources again. I know I asked before, but could you be a little more clear on that? Under what category would that come under?
So limited resources, these were the reasons why we have conflict. So why we have conflict. So limited resources like money, time, property. So, you know, there's conflict over money, conflict over time, conflict over property. So these are limited resources we have conflict over.
I don't quite get that.
So like have conflict over money. So just so it's a resource. So money, time, things that are things that are finite, things that are, so just things like that, tangible things we have.
We have conflict.
We have conflict. We have conflict because we have unmet expectations. I was expecting somebody to do this and they're not doing it. But we can also have conflict over money. I gave somebody some money, they didn't give it back. You know, or time. This person wants to take all my time. Or property. This person is dog is peeing on my lawn.
Emotions, logic, empathy. Okay. So that's on my behalf to have more empathy.
Yes.
Empathy and I might have limited resources on time.
Right.
Or that person might have. I see. But logic.
Oh, so the logic wasn't. So the logic, empathy, and emotions were the things we need to consider when we're in a scenario. So the first three were the reasons we have conflict, and the second three were things we need to consider. Things that we need to consider. So yeah, there should have been a separate label over that.
Okay, that's what I was having trouble with. Thanks. Okay. Now it makes sense.
Oh, okay. I guess we could. So we'll close there. So this is going to be our last lesson until August.
Sounds good. Let's pray. Father, you are good. Lord, you're always good. And we spent quite a number of time, quite a number of hours, not just listening to a lecture, but seeing the comparison of life, some of the definition to open our eyes, but more importantly, Lord, that we can actually filter through your words and how we should react, how we should behave, and how we should deal with different situations that arises, whether the other person is causing it based on their attributes, based on their pain and emotions, based on their life experiences that were never healed, or maybe somehow we decided to give them and cause them and create a pain that they never had. So we become the predator. So Father, we pray for not only just wisdom and understanding and insight, but to first look at ourselves. Are we the elephant in the room? Are we the one that's causing all these problems? Are we the one basically addressing and overlooking things that shouldn't be overlooked and not be able to walk away? Are we the one that's basically causing the conflict? And we're the one destroying the strategies of others trying to resolve it. Help us to make peace with us so that we don't destroy your good works as a witness for you. And help us to mend some of the people that we have injured that we don't even know about. And some of the people that we
Give us Lord.
actually scar completely. But yet they walk around not knowing what to do because every time they bump into people like us, or maybe a different similar song or a TV program would trigger their pain. Help them to resolve. Help us to be a solution, not a cause in this area. Help us to develop in the area of wholeness, just like your son, so that we can actually distribute the traits and helping others to grow closer to you, that they can see the model of God in us and the cross in front of us. And Father, we pray that on a daily basis, we go through different issues. Sometimes we inadvertently say things, or maybe react to things, or maybe flippantly, emotionally destroy others and not know. And maybe others have hurt us that we don't realize it and never really recover from it. And from then we cover it up and end up hurting others. So Father, we pray that you continue to open these areas in our lives, whether they are co-workers, they're cashiers, or salespeople, or maybe just a local person working in a supermarket, or maybe someone that does janitorial work. Help us never to look down, but rather always look up, and always not show area of respect, but to show an area of love for them, which is the highest quality you want us to display. And Father, we pray that during this time off this month, Michael has a lot of things to prep up as far as his different types of preparation with the different groups of people that he may plan with, his work, his spare time, his social life. There may be conflicts along the way. There may be injuries that can cause him to reveal and to think about these things. And maybe he himself can cause injury to others and he may not know it. So Father, make him be aware of it. Let him review his notes so that you can change him. And like the lecture was given, that sometimes, Father, you use conflict in the midst of our lives inside the wilderness in Egypt. And with conflict, you make us better and not make us bitter. So, Father, continue to be the Lord of our lives and not let us be the Lord of our lives, so that you can actually rule in us. And with that, we can actually see the goodness of who you are, because we have changed away from you, but you've never changed away from us. Father, bless us in this area there, so that we can not just walk away fat, but to bless others as we give it away freely, as you have given it to us for free. Help us to be that type of person, to be able to leave such an example for others to see that we can actually display God in their lives and show them and share who God is in our lives. That even though they can't see God, they can see the good traits in us, the good fruits, the honesty inside, the trustworthiness, the things, the good report, the loveliness of who God is in our lives. Father, be with us tonight, even though it's the last night, but it's never the ending. It's just a time away. And work in our lives so that when we get a chance to fellowship, we can share the many things that pops up, including questions to challenge Michael. So, Father, we pray that during this time period, that you give us the wisdom how to deal with people this whole month. The people that we bump into, the people that we may have major conflicts to, right before the aggression and right before the fight and flight and the freezing point in our lives and causing that to others. Help us to resolve things, to reveal, so that in the future we can learn how to address things. Not only just using strategy, but the strategy is filtered through your words with application. And so, Father, we ask for a good night's rest. We ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Mm-hmm.